about its chances to stop the fighting and free the hostages. Netanyahu, after meeting with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, is taking a more cautious approach towards the deal. Some of its 21 points are potentially problematic for Israel and unacceptable to Hamas as well. More in this report.
Heading into today's meeting at the White House with Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Trump was upbeat about his peace plan for Gaza being accepted by Israel and Hamas, writing on his Truth Social platform, quote, "We have a real chance for greatness in the Middle East. All are on board for something special, first time ever. We will get it done." Vice President J.D. Vance, speaking to Fox News, was more cautiously optimistic, saying, quote, "These things can get derailed at the very last minute. So while I remain very hopeful, I am cautiously hopeful. I'm going to let the diplomats continue to work on this, but our principle here is very simple. We want all the hostages to come home. We want Hamas to no longer be a terror threat to the state of Israel." But Netanyahu made clear going into today's discussion that he sees the proposal as very much a work in progress, telling reporters, quote, "We're working on it. It has not been finalized yet, but we're working with President Trump's team." Some of the 21 points in the plan are positions that Netanyahu has already said Israel rejects, such as an eventual role for the Palestinian Authority in the governance of Gaza and the renewal of peace talks that sees Palestinian statehood as a final goal. And while Hamas says it is yet to see the plan, its leaders have already rejected its call for the terror group to give up its weapons. Still, the U.S. plan is the most detailed proposal yet to end the fighting and free the remaining 48 hostages. Whether it succeeds depends in large part on how much President Trump is willing to invest in getting all the parties, Israel, Hamas, and the Arab states that will help rule Gaza and fund its reconstruction, to accept Trump's vision for Gaza and the region.
The stakes are high going into today's White House meeting, no more so than for the 48 hostages still remaining in Gaza. Over the past few days, their families and supporters have stepped up their public campaign to get the hostages back home safe and sound. More on that in this report. As President Trump prepared to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu today at the White House, he was sent a letter by the families of the remaining 48 hostages. In it, they thanked Trump for his efforts to end the war, telling him, "You alone have the strength to push this deal to the finish line." Although the letter does not explicitly criticize Prime Minister Netanyahu or his government, it implores Trump to stand firm against any attempt to sabotage the deal, and says his dual focus on ending the war and bringing all 48 hostages home stands in stark contrast to the expanded war that Israel is currently conducting. The letter is part of a stepped-up campaign by the hostage families and their supporters to pressure all parties involved to end the Gaza fighting and bring their loved ones home. This includes mass rallies in Tel Aviv and across Israel.
Families of the hostages are begging for a deal, and also the whole world is tired of the war. Also, Israelis are tired of the war. So people want to see this end, and I think the only way to end it is a deal that will guarantee security, that will guarantee a better future for everyone, and that especially will bring our hostages home.
There is growing concern among the families over the health of the hostages and whether the current IDF offensive could endanger them. This, as Hamas claims it has lost contact with the terrorists holding two of the hostages captive inside Gaza City. For the families, the Trump plan may be the last best hope to get them to safety. Well, joining us for more on these issues is Reserves Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, now a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy, and Ambassador Michael Oren, the former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Gentlemen, thank you for joining. Michael, I'm going to start with you. This meeting, of course, today between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, many are looking at it as a potential turning point in the war or towards its finish. Before we break down some of the specific points, just your general impression about what are the chances that this really will be, an opportunity to bring the war to its conclusion and free the hostages?
Good to be with you, Kalev. I can't assign an actual percentage of a chance. You know, I've read this this proposal in detail to what has been published so far, and I've written about it. And on paper, it seems to be a cogent, compelling argument. Hamas has to accept the fact that it has lost this war. Hamas has to say that it has lost, that it is willing to lay down its arms. Those Hamas members who want to stay in Gaza have to actually swear, they have to take an oath that they will forswear terrorism, that they'll accept basically the peace process, accept Israel's right to exist. Those Hamas officials who do not want to take that pledge will be put on a boat and shipped elsewhere overseas. And on the other side, the Israeli government is going to have to agree to discuss what the Saudis have called a pathway to Palestinian statehood, which is a very high hurdle for the present government of Israel in the coalition. So to tell you whether there is going to be a tremendous chance that Hamas is going to surrender or that Mr. Smotrich and Ben Gvir are going to discuss Palestinian statehood and end the war, I can say there's not a very high chance. Having said all that, though, President Trump wants this war ended. It wants it ended either by military means or by diplomatic means, by negotiations, and it wants it over quickly. He wants it over quickly. He wants to proceed on Saudi-Israeli peace. He wants that Nobel Peace Prize, which I think he deserves richly. And so Prime Minister Netanyahu is heavily dependent on Mr. Trump right now. He's what's standing between us and international sanctions. And Prime Minister Netanyahu will do everything possible to accept this peace deal. And Hamas may play it as Hamas has always played it, which is to say, we accept the deal, but with all sorts of reservations, and let's talk about it.
Right. And Jonathan, how are you feeling about this deal? And maybe the question of does it answers Israel's security concerns? Because there's a lot of novel features in this deal, including, for example, a multinational Arab Muslim force in or around Gaza, something Israel has never really had to deal with.
Yeah. So I agree with what Ambassador Owen said, always words of wisdom from him, but I'll say this. The first Trump plan to end the war was probably undercooked. It's a good idea to get Gazans out, rebuild the place, get Gazans back in, and to completely change the trajectory of the Gaza Strip. That wasn't made diplomatically well enough, and President Trump didn't have the Turks or the Egyptians or the Europeans or the other Arabs on board, so that plan didn't happen. This plan seems better cooked. There's more buy-in by regional and local players, but I would still say that the scale of naivete, there's a lot of the 21 points are pretty high on the scale of naivete, because to ask Hamas to renounce terrorism and to disarm, lay down their weapons is, I think, 100% contrary to their very core beliefs and their real ethos as mukawama, as resistance, as they see themselves. And I think that the likelihood of that happening is very low. I also think that as long as that doesn't happen, and I don't think it will, then I struggle to see any foreign Arab international peace force that will actually come in and face reality on the ground, which will be low intensity or mid intensity fighting, guerrilla and terrorism. So whereby I totally agree with what Ambassador Oren said, there's a lot of pressure on Israel and on Hamas's backers, on Turkey and on Egypt and Qatar to make this deal now and get it done. At the end of the day, Hamas, I think, will probably refuse, and they will try to use Israeli refusal in order to pin the blame on Israel.
Right. And as you both pointed out, there's elements here that Hamas has already said they'll reject disarmament, but there are also a couple of problematic points for Israel or this current Israeli government. The introduction of the Palestinian Authority or a reformed PA at some point in the governance of Gaza. The other renewal of peace talks with the aspirations of Palestinian statehood as an ultimate goal. Both things Prime Minister Netanyahu has rejected as recently as the UN, speaking to the UN General Assembly last week. Michael, how much wiggle room does the Prime Minister have here to say yes, but?
Not much, as I said earlier. We are facing international isolation. The Prime Minister has said as much. Remember the Sparta remark. And what is standing between us in that isolation is one person. It's Donald Trump. If, President Biden used to say, don't. You remember that, Caleb? Said, don't. And everybody did, including the Palestinians, the Iranians, and Israel, we did. When Donald Trump says, don't, this prime minister is going to have to think many, many times before he goes ahead and goes against the will of this president. And that extends not just to discussing this pathway to a Palestinian state or PA involvement in those negotiations or in that final arrangement, but also the question of annexation, which the prime minister is under mounting pressure within his coalition to agree to a partial or complete annexation of Judea and Samaria. And Donald Trump has expressed himself unequivocally against this. It's not the first time. He did it even his first term in office as well. So Netanyahu has to tread very, very carefully to avoid a head-on collision with this president. And we saw at the UN last week, Kalev, on the question of Ukraine, how this president can change positions very, very quickly. Right. We cannot afford that.
Right. And Jonathan, as again, you both mentioned Hamas likely to refuse some of them, but there is one point in this plan that specifically says that if one of the parties don't agree, meaning Hamas, some of the changes can be implemented in areas that are already secure, meaning are under IDF control. How likely is that happen while the IDF is still operating, that is going to be able to meet some of these conditions, introduce some kind of, like, for example, new civilian administration in Gaza?
Yeah, I think the game changer here could be Egypt. And if President Trump will inform the Egyptians that he's had enough of them blocking Gazans from getting out, and that he wants a temporary solution for Gazans out of Gaza into Sinai, that could be the virtual rug being pulled beneath the feet of Hamas, and that could really be the game changer that shuffles the cards and really rebalances the situation in Israel's favor, actually in Palestinians' favor, but to the disfavor of Hamas. I think we're getting more and more indications that there's less patience with the Egyptians in DC, and that more and more people are understanding that their obstructionism and frankly their cruelty towards Gazans is what has been one of the reasons why Hamas has been able to hold on for so long. In addition to the hostages that they took, are 48 hostages that are still there and need to be brought back. But the fact that they have been keeping the gates closed is something that has allowed Hamas this wiggle room and diplomatic oxygen. If that changes, if Hamas refuses Trump's proposal, and then pressure is applied on Egypt, that could be the game changer that Hamas really doesn't want, but that could be really good for Israel.
Right. And speaking of good for Israel, Michael, one of the potential benefits here, obviously the release of the hostages first and foremost, the end of fighting in Gaza, but perhaps expanding the Abraham Accords, bringing some more Arab and Muslim states. But the plan doesn't specifically cite any commitment by those states to do so. So what are the chances that this will bring more states, and should that be something that should be more forthcoming in the process?
Well, let's be honest with ourselves here. Hamas is not going to release all the hostages. Hamas is evil, but it's not stupid. And Hamas knows that the day it releases the last hostage, the day that the IDF goes in there and destroys Hamas. And not surprisingly, in the last few days, Hamas has said, well, we don't know where they all are. There are several who are missing, accounted for. And that was entirely expected. One would have expected in a negotiation under normal circumstances that the United States would offer a sweetener to the Israelis. Say, okay, make a concession on this pathway. Make a concession about a possible involvement of a reformed Palestinian Authority in the future. God knows what reform means and whether the Palestinian Authority is capable of reforming itself. Make those gestures, and we will, the United States, will compensate you. With a peace agreement, for example, with Saudi Arabia, or we'll bring Indonesia into the Abraham Accords, or Azerbaijan, which is kind of low-hanging fruit. Who knows? Maybe even Pakistan into the Abraham Accords, and that will enable Netanyahu to go back to his coalition, go back to his contingency in the Likud, and say, hey, "Look, we're making a sacrifice, but look what we're getting. We're getting peace with the Sunni world and the possible bonanza worth hundreds of billions of dollars in trade." He could do that. But the question is whether now, in our weakened position, vis-a-vis the world in this war, Israel has that type of leverage. It had that type of leverage back in 2020 where in exchange for not annexing Area C of Judea and Samaria, Israel was able to get the UAE to join the Abraham Accords. I don't know if we have that same leverage today, but that certainly would be a sweetener, Kalev, for Netanyahu to go back to the Israeli public and say, look what I'm getting for making what is essentially a symbolic gesture to the Palestinians and the Arab world.
And Jonathan, as you both have said, there's a good chance this deal may not succeed, or if it does, it's still going to be a while towards implementation. In the meantime, IDF forces are on the ground in Gaza, operating in Gaza City. How do you see that operation, if that is the case, and the war must go on, how do you see it progressing now in the next weeks or even months?
Yeah, I just came from the Gaza border, actually, so I heard a lot of the noise, and I spoke with a lot of the people on the ground. I would say that it's basically talks and tanks. My friend at FDD, Mark Dubovitz, he just coined that, and I'll credit him. It's talking and tanks on the ground. That's what's happening. And Israel is still using the military on the ground in order to apply pressure on Hamas and to show Hamas that this can get much worse if you continue to hold on to the hostages and to refuse to surrender. And things are happening in DC, which is part of that pincer movement. On the ground, there still, unfortunately, is a lot of Hamas infrastructure. There are a lot of Hamas fighters that are still capable of fighting, that if Israel wants to actually win the war, they need to either be killed or to surrender, or for a political agreement to be achieved. I am very concerned about the hostages. The situation isn't positive, and I think that that is ultimate ace up Hamas's sleeve when it comes to applying pressure. So Israel is applying pressure on the ground and politically. Hamas still has those hostages, and I agree with the assessment of Ambassador Oren. Hamas are extremely evil, but not stupid.
All right, talks and tanks. I think Winston Churchill said, better jaw than war.
Right.
But it looks like we're going to have plenty of both, at least in the coming days. Jonathan Conricus, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And Ambassador Michael Oren, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you to you both, and Gemar Chatzima Tova. Thank you.
Now, as we approach Yom Kippur, a time of reflection and giving, many families in Israel are struggling to put food on the table. One organization that's been making a real difference is Yad Ezra V'Shulamit, dedicated to feeding children and families in need. Well, joining us now is celebrity chef Jamie Geller to talk more about their work. Jamie, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Jamie, tell us, how should we be preparing for Yom Kippur?
Look, Yom Kippur is such a powerful day. My advice is to give, and give again. Tzedakah is one of the keys to getting sealed for a good year. When you think about it, when you give charity, God gives as well. When you have compassion on others, God has compassion on you.
Right. Now, Jamie, we live in a country, a world with so many great causes to support.
Yeah.
So where are you giving your charity before Yom Kippur?
You're right. There are so many incredible causes, but there are different levels of charity. And here's something that you should know. Giving food to hungry people in Israel is the highest level you can possibly give. Yad Ezra V'Shulamit is feeding the poor all across the country, and that is where I'm giving this Yom Kippur. So I'm asking every viewer before Yom Kippur, do one more good deed. Hear the cry of the hungry, the widows, the orphans, those who have lost everything because of the war. Give from your heart, and in that merit, may you be sealed for a year of life, health, and abundance.
And Jamie, maybe tell us a little about what it means for these families to get this kind of need, especially as you mentioned, it's just overall such a challenging time for Israelis.
It's absolutely heartbreaking. There's a whole new sector of society called the new poor. Before the war, they were not poor. They were on the giving end, and now they're on the receiving end. So you can imagine the humiliation associated with that. Yet Ezra V'Shulamit does everything they can to give in the most respectful manner. And when we give to support with food baskets and donations, basically, we are making the difference between having food on holiday tables or no food at all.
All right, certainly something that can make a difference. Thank you, Jamie, and Gemar Chatima Tova for the Yom Kippur holiday, of course.
Thank you.
And for our ILTV viewers, you can take part right now. Just scan the QR code on your screen and help Yad Ezra V'Shulamit feed people in need all across Israel in the coming year. Remember, your support can change a life. It can even save a life. And moving on, last night, Israelis living in central Israel near Tel Aviv were forced to shelter upon hearing the air raid sirens, warning of an incoming Houthi attack. More on this from ILTV's Devo Klein.
Late-night sirens were sounded across central Israel after the IDF detected a launch from the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen. The IDF confirmed that the projectile was intercepted by Israeli fighter jets on its way to Israel, and there were no reports of injuries or damages caused. The Houthis have claimed responsibility for the attack, claiming that, quote, military targets were targeted in Jaffa and Eilat. The Houthis have long been attacking Israel since the start of Israel's war with Hamas. Most recently, a Houthi drone that exploded in Eilat injured 20 people. 2 are still in critical condition. Israel struck the Houthis hard after the incident in Eilat. For now, it remains to be seen whether Israel will act in response to the latest Houthi attack from last night.
Following up on yesterday's car-ramming terror attack near Kedumim in Judea and Samaria, the IDF have published the name of the soldier who was killed in the attack. 20-year-old Staff Sergeant Inbar Avraham Kav from Lotem was killed during operational activity at the Jeet Junction. A preliminary investigation into the event shows that Inbar and another soldier were driving a military jeep in the area when they spotted a suspicious Palestinian truck driver driving erratically behind them. When the two pulled over, 24-year-old driver Mahmoud Aked from Nablus accelerated his truck towards the soldiers, attempting to run them over. The terrorist was quickly neutralized by IDF forces at the scene, but Staff Sergeant Kav was critically injured in the attack and later succumbed to his wounds at Beilinson Hospital in Petah Tikva, the IDF announcing that last night. Inbar served in the Paratroops Brigade's 890th Battalion. May his memory. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are meeting at the White House to discuss the U.S. proposal to end the Gaza war. Now, Trump is characteristically optimistic about its chances to stop the fighting and free the hostages. Netanyahu, after meeting with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, is taking a more cautious approach towards the deal. Some of its 21 points are potentially problematic for Israel and unacceptable to Hamas as well. More in this report.
Heading into today's meeting at the White House with Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Trump was upbeat about his peace plan for Gaza being accepted by Israel and Hamas. Writing on his Truth Social platform